And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, and most batshit ways possible. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me I have a newcomer into the temple, coming to us from St. Caedmon Studios, the one and only Andrew, coming to us with Knight Errant, which we'll be getting into tonight.
Hey, how y'all doing? Excellent. How about yourself, Ben?
I've been doing good. I'm getting the usual roasting from some of my friends in northern climates about the cold when it's nice and warm, and I'm down there, and I'm just reminding them. Remember what happened when you said that last time, and then you end up with a surprise blizzard?
Yeah, I went for a run this morning up in northern Maine, and the sweat in my hair was frozen by the time I got back to the car.
Mm-hmm. And should I notch that? Should I not? Since we brought up Maine, do I have to notch that off the Stephen King drinking game?
Oh no, what's that?
I will explain that later, but it's a drinking game that whenever certain things come up, you take a shot. I do not advise doing it because you'll probably end up with alcohol poisoning by the end of watching, say, It.
Alright, we'll skip on that one.
So, one of the things I often open up with around here is the humble beginnings, in a sense. Now, with that in mind, walk me through your first introduction to role-playing games and what made it stick.
Sure. So, for reference, I'm 27 years old. My first experience with tabletops was 20 years ago. My brother and our next door neighbors were playing D&D. It was a 3.5e, and they needed a healer. So my brother, who's 10 years older than me, says, "Oh, well, hey, I got a little brother. He can roll cure minor wounds or whatever it was even called back then. So yeah, I can make him roll to heal for us in a dungeon." So they ran over from the neighbor's house, banged on the door. "Hey, Andrew, I need you to make a character. We're gonna play a game." I'm like, "Oh, cool. Do I bring one of the N64 controllers?" No. We're playing a game on paper, and it kind of blew my mind. I was like somewhat invested. What really won me over was a conundrum we had. We were down in a dungeon, and we had like a pre-made board for it. And so this room, we have a choke point that all these orcs are spilling through, and we were panicking. Oh wow, we're really underprepared. What do we do? And I asked the GM, "Hey, can I?" There was a little picture of a statue near the hallway. I'm like, "Can I just push that over? Can we all team up and push that over and squish them, or at least block the entrance?" He says, "Yeah, you can do whatever you want. You just gotta roll the appropriate things, and we'll go through the procedures." And the total freedom offered to me there compared to the games video games I'd grown up playing, that was a big selling point to me. From there, I played 3.5 in high school, mostly because my buddies had bought 3 milk crates worth of books. There was a big sunk cost fallacy in there. Slowly branched out from there, started getting more into the old school stuff. Love AD&D. We got some odder influences in the mix, some Exalted, some RuneQuest, Chronicles of Darkness, but that's more from one of my design advisors than myself. I really mostly just stuck to the tried and true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can get that. And with Knight Errant, since it is going into being a chivalric role-playing game book, there's a couple games that I wanted to ask if you were familiar with or had been brought up to you in the past.
Shoot.
The obvious one that I feel obligated to bring up, and you've probably heard a bunch of people bring it up to you as well, is King Arthur Pendragon.
Yes, Pendragon is a beautiful game. Love the art. Love everything I've seen from it. I haven't played it. To my knowledge, Pendragon is going off of historical fantasy, correct? It's going around Arthurian legend, and you're in King Arthur's court.
Yeah. The big thing being the fact that one session is meant to be 1 year of game time.
I was not aware of that. That actually sounds pretty fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I really gotta play it.
Mhm.
Now that I know that, that sounds like a pretty interesting hook. No, I've seen a lot of the art posts around Twitter, and it does look lovely. I've mostly kept my head down on my own work right now, just because I don't want to like subconsciously pull from other things if I get involved in too many new games at a time. Plus, I've got so many unplayed games already on my shelf that need my attention.
Yeah, but everybody's got a bunch of unplayed games on their shelf in this hobby. That's nothing new.
That is probably the most defining aspect of people in our hobby.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, I definitely be interested in Pendragon. Knight Errant's biggest difference between, what separates us from that is I kind of ditched the historical element. Big influence from Arthurian legend, obviously, in the Carolinian cycles with Charlemagne and his paladins.
Which,
I put it in a fantasy world though, very strongly rooted in history, just so you have kind of like a familiar foundation that you can riff off of. But I stick with fantasy because you know what? Like we were talking about earlier, there's just some things from fantasy novels and even some video games that I had to put in one way or another.
yeah. Now, another entry. Since now this isn't a full-on game per se, it's a setting for one of the games you mentioned. Since you brought up AD&D, I have to ask if you are familiar at all with Birthright.
Birthright, was that for second edition? Is that the one that was all about like managing domains, kind of like factions at war?
Yeah, which would end up being the chief inspiration for a successor of sorts called Seeds of Wars, which I've covered on this channel. Uh,
I definitely seen discourse on it. No, I'm not too familiar with Birthright. I know the premise because I've seen a lot of people talking about making faction play more functional and ways to kind of innovate on the older ideas. Just because we're talking about wargaming roots, if you're going to keep the roots, you might as well try to encourage some growth off of that, maybe some new shoots. And so you're seeing a lot of these new kind of interesting ideas of turning the wargaming elements, kind of riffing off of diplomacy, for example, and having a lot of this kind of meta level role playing that drives faction play. Birthright was referenced a lot in these kind of conversations, but I'm really not familiar with the second edition at all, to be frank.
yeah, Birthright. Uh, there was something of a successor of the concept in things like Kingmaker, which is one of the more famous modules for Pathfinder.
Right.
To the point where Owlcat decided to make a whole game out of it, which it is the start of Owlcat's both hero and villain arc, depending on who you ask. Uh, of course, Owlcat's more recent work was on Rogue Trader.
Ah, copy.
Yeah. Between that, they did Wrath of the Righteous, which brings in the more mythic path elements of Pathfinder to go even more nuts. Uh, but those are the two big ones that get brought up. And there's a bunch of others I could bring up the recent Strange Bedfellows project for Age of Ambition. But there has always been a fantasy of not just being a knight, but being a knight with responsibilities, essentially.
Yeah, noblesse oblige.
Yeah.
Please pardon my terrible French pronunciation.
To that, I will say, if anyone gets mad at us for our French pronunciation, we'll just say we do not speak surrender.
Hey, the French have a long, successful military history if you just go beyond or further back than the 20th century.
There was a gag when I was in high school of typing French military victories into Google and hitting "I'm feeling lucky." Then it gives you a fake version of the no results thing saying, "Did you mean French military defeats?"
Right.
Uh, but when it comes to that concept, I've mentioned plenty of times I'm a big fan of Legend of the Five Rings, and with that one there's the assumption that you're playing as a samurai within a clan, so it's
Right.
you have a similar concept. Now, within when you say that this is a fantasy setting rooted in history, do you mean it's a case where it's a fantasy setting that has its own long history, or a fantasy take on a particular point in history?
It's more so the latter. It's so I'm aping a couple things from the Baroque or Renaissance period. Essentially, that was kind of the highest technological level from which mankind was kind of taken back by a great series of catastrophes and widespread wars. It's almost like the pike and shot era came to be and was so horrendous, and the population decline and collapse worldwide brought everyone back to the age of chivalry. So now they kind of have this retrospective appreciation and kind of newfound zeal for the age of chivalry. They a little bit of it is kind of cargo culted, if you know what I mean when I say that, where
Yep.
they're uncovering these relics and trying to piece together a narrative because a lot of it was lost. But yeah, you have this kind of second approach to an age of chivalry and feudalistic sort of values and systems. You have, of course, odd settlements that have higher technology levels. You have odd settlements that might have completely different economic systems, because when things collapse, in certain mountainous regions, you might have bottlenecks or kind of safe, they're sheltered from collapse. They might stay more constant with how they were before. But, to your question, I don't have a giant timeline, for example, for all the events of the game. I give you very solid reference points, pretty clear analogs to real life history that you can play off of, but I want to leave it ambiguous to a degree that you can take it in any direction. If you enjoy history, if you enjoy fantasy or realistic fiction, you have kind of a springboard to then fill in the gaps and especially fill in kind of the empty spaces. If you're using random generation tables in our system, phenomenal. If you've done your reading, you can flesh those out pretty quick. And of course, we've got our own tables for kind of window dressing for those if you're not so familiar.
Yeah. And given that, one of the concepts that I often talk about on this channel and otherwhere is what I call all roads lead to Rome. This is a concept about how in a lot of games since, I want to say, the late 80s, maybe in the 90s, we started to have more and more games that had a single unifying mechanic and a bunch of exceptions to that mechanic when it comes to resolution. This is where we go from a bunch of subsystems in early D&D, which was a artifact of wargaming, to to stuff like say World of Darkness, or like where everything revolves around that D10 pool. In that regard, does Knight Errant have a particular Rome when it comes to that, or is it?
No. Sorry to interrupt. No, I do try to play up on war game roots, and so there are a lot of kind of compartmentalized subsystems. Mm-hmm. The magic research subsystem, for example, you've got a research pool that's determined by intelligence and wit scores, and you have this research mini game that you can get fodder from it by. Sorry, this is kind of connecting a lot of mechanics that no one else has read yet, so it might be a little scatterbrained. Mm-hmm. When you're memorizing your spells for the day, because it's largely Vancian in design. When you're memorizing your spells for the day, you have 3 kind of concentric circles that you can prioritize different schools of magic. You can put one on the periphery, which means you get less casts per day, but you're rolling randomly to see if you get research points for it. You're kind of contemplating it. You're drawing new inspirations and kind of dissecting this school of magic on the periphery. So there's a lot of subsystems that you can research, you can kind of invest into, but no, there's not so much a Rome. For example, I don't really do much like universal dice resolution. It's not reliant on a dice pool. It's not reliant on a D20 for all these things. There's just a lot of kind of compartmentalized subsystems that mesh well together and interact with one another, but they stay pretty separate.
Yeah. I know that when it comes to combat, you on the Kickstarter you talked about having a rock paper scissors design for its action card system.
Yes.
Um, so when it comes to that, is it a case where both sides are revealing what action they're taking? Is it a case where everybody has like a hand of action cards? How is it going to work?
Yeah, so everyone's got a hand of action cards. Now, it translates pretty well over to mass combat with a couple of changes, but they can coincide simultaneously. If you want to have like a Bronze Age style heroic duel where Achilles and Hector are, 1v1ing each other and the armies might be battling side by side or whatever, you can have that. They just function a little bit separately, but they have the same kind of like round length, for example. So I got an action pool, which is all the cards in my hand. Let's just say for simplicity, I got one attack, one guard, one evade, one grapple, one feint. That's one of everything. So the round is broken up into action cycles. An action cycle is just 3 activations, and an activation is just like a time slot for each card. So let's say you and I are fighting. We've rolled off for initiative. Let's just say you have it. So you play a card, and on the backs of these cards, you've got little like medieval manuscript figures showing the orientation of the card you're playing. So you're playing it against me, so you're going to face the correct man towards me that you want. So there's one where he's swinging an axe over his head. That's your overhead orientation. There's one where he's kind of doing like a duelist lunge with his sword. That's the thrust. There's one where he's swinging, kind of turning at the hip. That's a sweep. So let's say you want to hit me with an overhead attack. So you play it face down, you got that overhead figure facing towards me. Now, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, he's not going to start by guarding overhead. That's just a weird opener. He's either going to attack me, he's going to feint and pretend he's going to attack me and then follow up with something else, or he's going to grapple me. For simplicity's sake, I'm not going to get into grappling because I swear that not a single tabletop system has a simple grappling mechanic. And that's fine. Grappling is complex in real life too. So at any rate, let's say I'm thinking you're going to attack. So now I play my card face down, and I'm going to play a guard. So a guard negates an attack if I'm matching up with your orientation. So you got your overhead orientation facing towards me. You're swinging your axe over your head. You're trying to cave my helmet in. So I'm going to play my overhead orientation guard to line up with your card. And now we may choose, do we want to play up to 2 more cards, excluding feints? Feints don't really take up a time slot. They're kind of just a placeholder to confuse you. So we may play up to 2 more for the cycle. And then once everyone's done playing cards, all right, we start from the first, we flip over, we resolve. So let's say you followed up that overhead attack with, I don't know, let's say you're just going to double down and now you're going to do a thrust attack against me. Well, for the second one, I'm thinking, all right, yeah, he's probably just going to try to finish me off in 2 hits. So I'm going to evade to the left. And evade is, it also negates attacks, but it's not always usable. If I'm fighting shoulder to shoulder, how am I going to dodge to my left or to my right? I'm going to bump into guys. It's not going to work. So evade has higher success chances. It can put you in a corner because it also kind of doubles as a stamina bar. We'll get into that later. But so I'm going to try to evade. So we got our 2 cards played on each side, and we decide we're done playing cards. Okay. So now it comes to activation. We activate the first cards that were paired off, your overhead attack and my overhead guard. You swing your axe over at me and I block with my shield. Phenomenal. Now you go for your thrust attack. We unveil that. We unveil that I'm evading. So now I step to my left and I'm safe.
All right. And how would turn order when you've got multiple participants be handled?
So it goes by basically team initiative. So let's say your venturing party is 5 knights. You've got 5 men at arms. So 10 guys versus, say, 10 goblins. So we roll initiative. The human party wins initiative. So it goes by essentially speed order of who declares targets first. And then from there, you're all just lining up your cards. So let's say you've got the highest speed of your party. You declare your target, you play, and the target you declared gets to play his response. And then the second in speed order goes next to declare target, and then his target responds in such order.
Which, based on how you describe that, it sounds not far moved from games that use popcorn initiative, as it's called.
I'm sorry, you mind just explaining that? Popcorn initiative?
The idea is instead of everybody having a defined turn order through like an initiative order or something, it's a case of deciding which side goes first, then one side activates, then the other side activates, and vice versa.
Yeah. So like a round is broken up into the movement phase and the action phase, and you're rolling initiative at the movement and at the turn of the action as well. So I might, posture very aggressively because I won movement phase initiative, but it's not guaranteed that my party is going to win in action phase. Attacks do resolve simultaneously, with the difference that the highest speed between two combatants does resolve first. So let's say you're dueling me, I've got a knife or a dagger, and you've got, let's say, like a quarrying hammer, something really slow. Otherwise, we have same speed, but your weapon's slower. So if I try to poke you with that dagger, that's going to resolve before you hit me with the hammer. But otherwise, everything does resolve when those cards are flipped over.
Which, this brings in a bit of an elephant in the room, and that is how ranged weapons like bows or crossbows or even a sling would be handled.
Oh yeah, range combat, it's incredibly simple. You play your attack card face up and just say, all right, first I should clarify, kind of like chainmail, you're declaring your target before initiative has even been rolled. So that can throw a wrench in things if you lose initiative there, but you're declaring. I usually just play an attack card face up just so people know who is doing what, just limit confusion. Say, all right, let's say I have a unit of 20 archers. We're declaring we're going to be firing into your heavy infantry. Excuse me one second. So we declare we're going to be firing into them, and just according to your rate of fire, you're going to be rolling a big blob of to hit dice. It's just simple, a d6, base hit chance of 5 out of 6, which sounds a little high, but you're going to be consulting a matrix which has more negative factors than positive factors for it to hit.
Now, this is where I wanted to shift into the fact that, as I understand it, there's a kind of inbuilt assumption that all the player characters are knights of either the same order, different orders, or something in between.
Yep.
So, how do you make sure that individual characters can still have a degree of variation?
So one thing is weapon choice is a huge element in combat. You might play entirely differently just because you have a battle axe versus me. I might be using an infantry saber and a buckler. Your utility is completely different. If you have mastery in your weapon, that changes a lot as well. So as far as kind of individualization, there's also in character generation, you have two options for how your party or your table might want to generate. You can roll starting gold and multiply it by 10, and you've got a grocery list. You can peruse the rule book and buy whatever money you can afford. The other option, which I think is more exciting to veteran tabletop players, is there's 3 archetypes. And picking an archetype is just kind of like a loadout. You start, it might say, here, I'll pull up an example actually. I'm going to go to the Conclave of 7 Kings, which a member of this is called the Kingsmen for simplicity. So Kingsmen have 3 archetypes.
Missed opportunity to have an order of the 7 kings. Or not 7 kings, 7 keys.
No, kings.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a Halloween joke.
Oh, okay. There you go. Wow, it takes me back. So their archetypes, they're kind of themed around exploration and just martial prowess. They're kind of the tactical fighters. So archetypes, if you go with that kind of limitation on character gen, it might give you something unique on your archetype. So the first one they have is the Conqueror. So they start with 1 of any pole weapon, 1 of any bow or crossbow, 1 demi-human weapon they claimed from a mortal foe, and I'll elaborate on that. They can get either a breastplate and helm, or full scale, a backpack, a week of trail rations, and a regional map. Now, their mortal foe. If you're playing a Conqueror archetype, you select one demi-human race to be your mortal foe. You can never make peace with them. They will never have a positive reaction roll towards you. Basically, your reputation with them is you can never reconcile. If I choose goblins, it doesn't matter if it doesn't matter if the rest of my party are goblins, which you can't really do. But I'm just playing it up for hyperbole. They will always hate me. There is a mark out for my name. So that gives you kind of like a quest hook in your archetype right there that can give you a lot of fodder for unique gameplay, questing, and just your initial loadout. The other archetypes, you have the Explorer, which the one thing that they have, they get a lot more like kind of logistical items, tents, more torches, candles, rope pole, 10-foot pole. More excitingly, they have pack animals. What else did they have? Oh, they start with one treasure map. That's the fun one.
Yeah.
Walking armory. They get a lot more weapons right off the boot, and a lot of these guys actually, every archetype gets a pretty solid amount of weapons to start with because that's their whole thing. They're fighters. But there's a lot of opportunity within. I know there's also how many classes? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, plus the secret class, which I don't tell anyone about. So, I mean, there's 11. You've got quite a few options in there.
And
Would
class be in the position of order? Because when I look at the example character sheet, I don't see class in there, so I'm guessing that's just
yes. Like your knightly order is your class. I sometimes use them interchangeably depending on who I'm talking to. I just don't want to throw people off with my own kind of terminology.
I'm also guessing that when it comes, you have level and you have prestige, and I'm guessing the defining line between them is one of them is kind of your achievements in battle and the like, and the other one is social standing.
Yeah. So your level is your advancement within your order. It kind of shows your skills within their own kind of niche. So you're gaining order abilities and whatnot as you progress in level. Prestige is more of like a social currency. It's an abstraction of your ability to pull rank. Yeah, you have these obligations and oaths as a nobleman. I have to protect the people of my realm. I have to do all these things, but it's not just a ball and chain around your ankle. Because when you have prestige, you could march up to the baron or whoever in your land and say, "Hey, I'm requesting. I need men-at-arms. I need you to levy all these troops." And so essentially each order has a prestige die. So some orders are better at pulling rank than others because those kingsmen, they're very charismatic, they're very well known. Their order is kind of like the first responders of the medieval world. So they're very well liked. They're rolling on, let me check. You'd think if I made this game, I know it better than anyone else. The issue is I know all the hundreds of revisions it's gone through.
That's pretty standard.
Yeah. So they start off with a D8, and that advances to a D12 at the max level. So that's pretty significant. The Orphans of Perdition are kind of like these exiles, like sorcerer knights who protect people who, they protect lepers and exiles, etc. They have a D4. So right off the bat, Kingsmen can capitalize a lot more on social prestige. So you roll your prestige die, and you might have small modifiers based on your wit or your leadership. But whatever you roll, multiply it by 100, and that's the gold point value of how much you can leverage in that moment. So let's say I go to the bear and say, "Hey, I need you to levy troops. I need you to furnish them with equipment. We need to go deal with this orc lair, ASAP as possible." So I roll, and I might get a terrible roll. I might get a 1. Okay, 100 gold point value. That's not much, but we'll make it work. I might also roll 800 gold point value, and that's 1 prestige point that will be very well spent. I got to bring these troops back eventually because otherwise there's no one left to defend the realm. But if I've got an extra 800 gold point value troops, at my beck and call for this one raid, that's pretty much a guaranteed victory, or at least it greatly tilts the scales in your favor.
I can get that, and Now, given the fact that you have that you had title on the character sheet, I'm guessing as you go up in individual levels, that title will change the way it kind of did in AD&D first and second.
Yeah, exactly. So your first level is a Kingsman, you're just a veteran. 10th level is Lord of War. Somewhere in between there's General, Field Marshal, etc.
Uh, Now, when it comes to the action pool, is that the number of cards of that type that you have in your hand, or is it how many you can play in a given round? What's the impact?
Yeah, it's how many you have in your hand. It's so the cards in your hand also double as a pool of resources essentially to manage in a fight. So there's a lot of effects that might make you discard. And when you're found with a completely empty hand, two really bad things can happen. One, people can get actions of opportunity if you're standing around, twiddling your thumbs. And two, anything that might displace you, like a shove or whatever. If someone displaces you and you got nothing in your hand, you're knocked prone. Getting knocked prone, especially in a suit of armor, you're not going to be able to get up very easily. And as soon as before you know it, a goblin might be sticking a knife in your visor slit. That's a pretty, that's kind of your only lose condition in full play early on in the game. So there's a point in kind of the mid-game, upper middle levels where you have more cards than you can play in a round. And a lot of that is because you have options as you develop as a character and as you gain more abilities to kind of burn your own cards to do more exceptional things. I talked about weapon choice being really important. So the infantry saber has a very fun mastery skill. Let me pull it up so I don't screw up the wording now. So your infantry saber has the mastery skill Deadly Flourish. So if you have a successful attack, or rather if you feint before a successful attack action, you can make an additional instant attack action using the False Edge attack type. And now this is what's called a lightning strike. So you're paying more cards to get a second attack. So it's going to cost you 3 cards total for what would normally cost you 2. But the action economy on that is excellent. If I hit you and I know you're really close to death, let's say we have a good GM, this is how I would personally run it. I would not tell you that he's close, but you can probably infer by what I've said. You get the feeling it's all right. Well, maybe I dump some more cards into this and really put myself at risk of being in trouble, just to get that instant Deadly Flourish and hit him with the False Edge. If you're unfamiliar with sabers,
Yeah.
a lot of them. Oh yeah. So you know the False Edge. Perfect. Yep. I done a little bit of HEMA, really not much, but I got so many people that False Edge. I love that stinking thing. But yeah, so I mean, it does a little less damage, but you're essentially doubling down and just getting more bang for your buck. Resource-wise, it's less efficient, but if I can ensure something's death there, it might be a worthy trade.
I've had my fair share of experiences with HEMA and with SCA, and
Right on.
my colleague Zan, who's also the editor-in-chief for my project, has his own particular story with the SCA, specifically with a knight who didn't like the fact that he was apparently using a spear as a total weapon instead of just standing and poking. Or tried to tell him that he couldn't dual wield Zweihanders when he was playing a Landsknecht.
Yeah, I live so far outside of civilization, I haven't had to deal with anything quite like that. My experiences with HEMA out here was that the nearest college used to have a fencing club, and I reached out to the president of this former club and said, hey, you want to try something crazy? Sure, why not? So we show up, we've got these plastic, these vinyl trainers and no protective equipment. It's like, all right, I'll let you hit me harder. I'll pull, I'll pull my swings a bit if it makes you feel better. Let's order some masks and gloves eventually. Boy, I thought I was gonna break some fingers just from how many times I got hit to the knuckle. But yeah, that was a blast.
Yeah, the main thing I remember out of the times that I've done fencing is how I could never quite figure out Italian grips. They're just friggin' weird.
Oh, like the finger cutting, like maximizing kind of the leverage on just your grip.
Just
so that you swing quicker.
the two finger rings on them on opposite ends. I'm
Yeah,
like, how the hell am I supposed to have this without one of them getting in the way? Uh,
right.
I would always prefer like French or German grips. Uh, I think part of it was that they were designed for people smaller than me. Um, I'm
That's always within the realm of
I'm
possibility.
6'6", so I have to deal with tall people problems constantly
Holy crow.
when getting stuff, and even when just being on an airplane, there's the problem of low ceilings. Uh,
Right. Yeah, everyone wants to be tall, but no one wants to hit their head on their shower curtain rod in the morning. No one wants back problems.
or breaking at least 3 exit signs in 20 years. Because that, but
Exactly.
since you brought up weapons, I did want to ask: is when it comes to weapon perks and mastery skill, is it a case where weapon perks are the things that weapon is always going to have, whereas mastery skill is going to be something you'd only get if you have particular
Yes.
orders or something?
Yeah, so the perk is innate and the mastery skill is earned usually by hitting a threshold of like, how many people have you or how many killing blows have you scored with this?
Mhm.
How many times have you activated something specific to the perk? Like hammers have bell ringer, so if you roll for hit location, you hit someone on the head with a hammer. Now that's going to blind them for a short duration. Where if you're playing in real life, I'll just put like my forearm and block the orientation of my cards. I'm not going to tell you how many I'm playing. I'm not going to tell you how they're oriented. That's a good way to get some panic, by the way, is having a dual wielding enemy hit someone on the head with their mace, and then from there it's just fog of war. You're just guessing. So like getting mastery on a flanged mace might just be provoke the bell ringer perk 10 times, for example.
Yeah. Now, speaking of one thing I forgot to ask when it came to the rock paper scissors design, that if two people are doing an attack, is that where the whole overhand sweep and thrust would determine priority in a similar rock paper scissors?
Yeah. So if we're both attacking, whatever resolves first comes down to adjusted speed. So every weapon has a little table that shows the different attack types. So let me pull up something like the halberd is the Swiss Army knife. No pun intended.
That's a joke that's got layers.
Right. So the halberd, for example, you've got one overhead attack that's crushing with the back end. You got the alternate overhead that uses the axe head, so that's cleaving for damage type.
Mm-hmm.
You got the sweep, cleaving. You got the thrust with a point that's piercing, and then the thrust with the butt end was just striking. This is like the most overwhelming in terms of how many things you've got from one weapon. But you've got a lot of options there. You've got more than half of all damage types available, and each attack type has a strength and speed adjustment. So, for example, overheads are typically slower than a thrust. So if my overhead attack makes me slower than your thrust attack, well, you're going to resolve first. Everything kind of has its own niche, especially thrust attack, like with a butt end. It usually does striking damage, which doesn't have too many special qualities to it, and it does a lot less than if I was to hit you with a pointy bit. But thrusting with a butt end usually knocks you back. Excuse me. It'll knock you back 1 inch, which if I've got 1 inch reach with every other attack on my pole arm, and you're stuck trying to hit me with your dagger, well, it's really advantageous for me to back you up or push you out of the way for one activation, and then hit you on the next one.
Yeah.
And now you've got to waste one activation taking that step, getting back into engagement range.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. With that in mind, when it comes to the action pool, is it a case where once everybody's resolved, you get that hand back, or is that?
Yeah, at the turn of the round.
All right. The big reason I asked is because whenever it comes to limited resources, there is gonna be that bad habit of what I like to call the rainy day paradox, or the 99 megalixirs paradox.
Right, I can't use this potion. I'm really gonna need it someday, and then you never use it. You beat the game before you use it.
Yeah. Or I've seen people say I want to use this till later, thinking that they're going to be able to do some full Nova thing on the B bag, and then somebody else kill steals the B bag, or as we call it, kill confirming.
Right, right.
And they don't get to use the thing that they had set up the entire day. But having it that you are going to eventually get it back at some point means that there's less of a risk of that kind of too good to use rainy day kind of thing happening.
Correct, yeah. Mostly action rationing comes down to, someone might have a special ability or whatever. Like if you're going up against a magic user who uses rhyme lore or frost magic, a lot of frost damage effects will make me have to ditch a card. I only briefly played Magic in high school, and boy, did I hate mill decks. They're just like the epitome of no fun allowed. So, if I see someone slinging frost magic, I'm gonna be a little more conservative because I like to have fun. I like to do things. I like to play cards and
Yeah,
actually get to do them.
I played my fair share of Sliver and Rainbow decks, especially during the Mirrodin era. I would
Right,
play a lot of strategies where the potency of the spell was determined on how many different colors you used.
right on.
So I could easily put out like 5/5 monsters with no effort
Yeah.
after a bit.
Another thing too is rationing. There's a lot of opportunities, like especially if you're getting mobbed, if you're getting targeted by multiple people, because the way I've kind of explained combat has only used one-on-one examples. When you're getting mobbed, you've got ample opportunities to react beyond your primary target, but that's a place as well where you're gonna be burning through cards. So you really gotta ration it carefully, because if my buddy next to me, if I know there's a chance he's going down, I might have to hold, I'm gonna have to hold the line, and that's become much more risky.
Yeah, I can certainly get that. Now since I brought up L5R, one of the things that can get a bit tricky with that game is how you have people from different clans trying to cooperate. The usual bandage is that they're all members of the Emerald Magistrate, who are usually agents that are sent out to deal with Imperial affairs.
Right.
Because this will probably be the most obvious thing I say, but some of the clans don't like each other.
Right.
But where this comes into something like Knight Errant is what sort of advice do you give if somebody wants to have it where you have characters from different manors, or is it more supposed to have the assumption of everyone's from the same manor?
So, it's funny you bring that up, because you basically preempted one of the bigger issues I had with playtesting in the very early days. I'm talking about over a year ago, where you get a lot of goodies handed out to you at character generation, just because I like kind of the smaller scale of wargaming. Overland adventures can be very fun when you've got, a band of 20 men-at-arms with you. So you get a decent amount of goodies. The issue is, if every knight comes from a different manor, and everyone's got a different goodie bag, because we all picked different manor archetypes. Well, my manor gave me a longship. I want to go do cool Viking borderline pirate adventures. I want to be a privateer. But my manor archetype gave me all these craftsmen, so I want to be the city planner, and I want to go secure natural resources to exploit and refine. Well, player 3, just got a bunch of bonus men-at-arms. I want to go take a castle. So we're all at odds with what the heck we want to do, because we all chose different goodie bags. So I kind of lay it out with two options. You can have everyone start from different manors, and you've got to find a way to juggle that. One way is honestly just by putting people at odds. I like PvP at the table, and I think that this system is actually matched up pretty well, where you can at least have some cynical politicking of, oh, well, we'll meet with you every now and then for limited cooperation, but otherwise, I don't want to see you anywhere near my property. The other option, too, is basically you can kind of stretch the definition of a manor. It might not necessarily be one noble family, but kind of like you formed almost a meta order of, we're all knights from different backgrounds, but now that we're trying to, for example, you had English knights, you had Norwegian knights, you had all these different noblemen across Europe uniting in the Kingdom of Jerusalem, and they founded new orders there. And you can basically say that you're a collection of different knights from very, very different backgrounds, but for all intents and purposes, we're one manor now that we're together.
Um,
But
I'm
I
tempted to
think
bring up
that. Oh, sorry.
I'm tempted to bring up the Free Worlds League from BattleTech, even though that's not exactly an endorsement, because the Free World League has the motto of "Don't bother attacking us. We have that covered."
Right. I say the latter approach. I just think it's a little bit counterproductive to open table play, and I love having an open table. One thing I've really prioritized with Knight Errant is having a very speedy character generation. We just onboarded a new player to the playtest group, which I'm pretty secretive about because the it's my baby. I'm secretive about it until it's been edited because I don't write for clarity. I pay people for that. So, we brought this new player on, and he was thrilled. He said, wow, that took me 10 minutes to get everything all set up. And yeah, that's the point, especially because, where you're given squires as part of your manor, you might end up with multiple player characters. One might be traveling quite a distance to pursue one element of his Grail quest. So now I've got a character who's going to be missing for a month. What do I do while he's in transit? Someone might be sailing for 2 months, for all I know. Well, the squire's ready to graduate. He can go challenge the Green Knight. He can get knighted, and now I've got a level 1 to play with.
Yeah, and I, c- I can certainly get that. Now, on the encounter end of things, uh, I'm assuming that you do have a proper bestiary set up. Uh,
Oh, absolutely. Over 200 unique monsters.
Now, within that bestiary, do you have a column or so on how to customize them for a given table?
I'm sorry, can you elaborate on that?
Uh, certain games, if they don't have a full monster customization system, which I'm not expecting every game to have, but do you have advices in like a column or something for tweaking the given monsters to fit what the table might want or need?
In terms of modifying individual monsters, not so much. I do have templates. I think that's actually a pretty solid. I don't know where those began in D&D's history. I'm sure you do, but like I like zombie dragons. There's not a zombie dragon entry in here, but you can apply the template and make your own. There's some things for like demon generation, for example. You want to make a unique demon, ranging anywhere from like a minion to like a max glory rating or rough estimate of level. Then you can cobble these things together. For tribal human elements, there's a lot of random generation tables. So let me pull it up. Like, let's see.
Mhm.
I put a lot of effort into this one monster just because they came up a lot on my random encounter tables. And so now I have a full-blown way to develop kind of tribal peoples in the New World. So you can roll for different traits based on, like they have kind of specialties in combat, rolling to see what type of civilization they are. Are they headhunters? Are they nomadic shaman cults? Are they nomadic raiders? Are they nomadic hunters? Are they agrarian state builders? Are they agrarian pacifists? Are they nomadic tributary tribe to a larger confederation, or are they agrarian tributary tribe to a larger confederation, etc.? A lot of elements there. Basically, a pseudo player character generation for chieftains, etc. Yeah, some monsters do kind of have the full run of the gamut for customization, but as far as general rules for tweaking, no.
Mm-hmm. All right, I can certainly get that. Now you've done a fair share of playtesting to the point that you named the manor the House of Playtesting. Um,
Yes.
I am curious if there were some things that you had in earlier drafts that after a bit of playtests had to get taken out because they didn't fit, or for other reasons.
More than I can recall. There's some places where I bit off a lot more than I could chew, and some places where I realized I was kind of writing myself into having a bit of a heartbreaker. Where I'm looking at this is, I don't have to copy what I grew up playing. I'll be frank. I do not think I can make a better game than AD&D. I love that game.
Yeah.
I've got a real reverence for it, but it just suits a different need than what I have.
Yeah. If I'm gonna be honest, and this is the hot take side of the monk.
All right, let's hear it.
I fucking hate the term heartbreaker. I hate its intent, and I hate what it's become.
Right on. So I'm kind of aping it. I'll be honest. I don't participate in a lot of online discourse. I lurk. I look at something and say, "Oh, I'm writing that one down. Okay, interesting."
But I've seen. I realized what the intent was when Alexandria had first posted it. But
Right on.
I feel like as time has gone on, it's become flanderized into this reductionist kind of comment. And there was something that Gila had said on their particular, I think it was on Subscribestar, no, not Subscribestar, Substack, that caught my attention, where they talked about how comparative observations are made, and that's standard, that's human nature, but in some parts of the game design field, there seems to be an undercurrent of reductionism with that comparative, as in, don't do this thing because somebody already has. And that's counterproductive to design. I feel like as the term heartbreaker has been flanderized, it has become counterproductive to design, where to the point where I've seen people refer to anything that uses a D20 as one of its core mechanics, a heartbreaker, or if it's taking place in medieval high fantasy as a heartbreaker, as if only one game can do this. And this isn't something
No. Frankly, I use 6 stats because if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
So do I.
Elements like that.
I use that myself, and my attitude was I'm not going to reinvent the wheel here. I'm going to reinvent the wheel in other places.
Exactly.
But I've even seen this when it comes to the idea of mixing cyberpunk and fantasy. This idea of don't do that because Shadowrun's already done that for years.
Right.
And I have seen, and over the last couple of years, there's been a few games that have done that I want to see succeed. Stuff like Vault, which is still on the cusp of being released. It isn't out yet. Stuff like Sinless, which is out and is doing its own thing with that concept, or things like Subversion, which I've talked about in the past, and how that kind of flips the cyberpunk fantasy thing on its head. Instead of magic returning to a futuristic world, it's a fantasy world that's becoming futuristic.
Right. I'm sorry. Just I'm looping back to your question. So elements that I've removed. Combat resolution used to be much more granular, to the point of being a bit of a headache. For example, I had various to hit location tables for melee attacks based on angles of sweeping. So sweeping attacks weren't just, you play your card sideways, you got the sweeping figure. It was, am I playing it in angle 2 to 6 or whatever? Am I starting from low on the left and going high on the right? And that changes where you're going to hit. A higher chance of hitting low on the body. I'm like, wow, this is really convoluted and adds so little.
That sounds like the kind of thing I'd hear from like Riddle of Steel, if you've played that.
No, I haven't. I realized it really needed to be scrapped. I was looking at rune quests, and that's a very, very fun system. I was looking at their to hit, and I'm just so jealous because you can just solve all that with one roll. This is where me eschewing dice from a lot of combat resolution kind of shot me in the foot. So I found once I took out the angle of sweep attacks, things were just so much simpler. Especially, I was doing this back before I had a solid design on the card backs. I think the design now is very intuitive. Anyone can understand what your orientation is for what you're playing. But back when just cocking it a little bit, cocking it 15 degrees in a sweep would make it an entirely different attack. And I was using index cards that just had words written on various ends.
Hmm.
That was not so fun for playtesting. I'm sorry. Actually, I wanted to circle back to the tangent we were on
Yeah.
with Heartbreakers. So, I think I think that Knight Errant, in its departure from a lot of its inspirations, is tonal. I say that in that Appendix N sci-fi fantasy literature, compared to a lot of the books I've read that have been published in the last 5 years, at least Appendix N is very sincere. I like Paul Anderson, Three Hearts and Three Lions. I stop occasionally. The prose in there makes me cringe a tiny bit. I'm like, wow, this is just really frank. The bluntness with which you describe, this main character says, I don't want to go to an elf orgy today. I'm bored. And I'm like, wow, that's just really frank and on the nose. The sincerity, I guess, about the fallenness of man is something I can appreciate. But on the flip side, I want Knight Errant to be almost a more romantic game. Comparing it to some of the medieval inspirations, like the German romance Parsifal, so basically just kind of their take on Sir Percival's Grail quest. It's got this real sense of grandeur to it. Knight Errant's combat system, you might, I wouldn't blame anyone saying like, wow, it's more gritty and more realistic. That's kind of, but
Those
what
are
it
two
really
words that have also been
accomplishes.
kind of flanderized.
Yes, absolutely. I'd say that's kind of tongue in cheek. But what it really accomplishes is it allows you to punch above your weight class in a way that isn't just random. I'm not just leaving things to fate and hoping I roll high to fight something way above my means. No, I can really dig my feet in, and if it requires a little bit of dumb luck, but also, if I'm really dedicating myself to trying to learn my enemy, I can punch above my weight class, and I can be, little Mac taking out all these different boxers. I can prove myself to my realm, and I can be a hero for today.
Hmm.
Because the odds are stacked against you in Knight Errant. Every random generation table is actually where you're going to find more world building than the flavor text. I like doing flavor text, but I don't want to overbloat the book. So you're going to find more world building through the random generation tables and encounter tables. And what you're going to find is you're behind enemy lines. For every castle you're able to take, there's a very high chance that invading armies are already amassing.
Hmm.
There's a mechanic called hellish incursions, where basically if you discover an evil settlement, every week that you do not deal with it, that you do not eradicate it, there's a mounting chance of an army of hell basically congregating there. So you have a pressing concern. It's not too awful. It's still very low chance as it begins. But the idea is it's just there to stop you from turtling. I like
Hmm.
city building. I like grand strategy video games, for example. But turtling is just so counterproductive to making an exciting campaign. I think that the threat of an incursion in any land where church bells aren't ringing, that really instills in you, well, even if I'm not gonna pursue the Grail anymore, if I kind of want to retire, I have to find armies. I have to delegate the defense of the realm and expansion to keep hell out. I have to find someone to do that, because if I don't, hell is gonna come to my doorstep.
Hmm. Pretty much. And I'll certainly be looking forward to seeing how that develops. But with that said, I do want to sincerely thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come all the way to my temple and enjoy the madness that happens around here.
Absolutely, brother. My pleasure.
And anytime you see fit to return, the door is always open. As I often say around here, drinking is not mandatory, but it is encouraged.
Next time.
And of course, a sincere thanks goes out to everyone who took the time out of their schedule to come onto the show and enjoy the madness. And there'll be plenty more where that came from, as there always is here, on the open bar of the internet. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.
物理を物理を